Good afternoon and welcome to another one of Dr. Mark's virtual tea time chats. I'm really lucky and quite pleased actually to be joined by someone who I've known for more years than I like to think back.
Yeah,
is
I think
is
we
Mike.
both agree.
And Mike's Group MD of Lactalis, UK and Ireland.
So Lactalis is the biggest cheesemaker in the world. We're a French dairy business. We're probably the second biggest dairy group in the world, but we own brands like President cheese and butter, but also Galbani, which is the biggest Italian cheese brand. And in the UK, we also own the Seriously brands, which is both cheddar and inspreadable cheeses, but also the Galloway brand in Scotland. So anybody in Scotland will know that one.
I'm really quite keen to understand a couple of things, really. One is how you and your leadership team have been coping through the last 12 months, and then after that, I'd really like to get your views as we start to move towards potential, coming out of this and business recovery, what you think is going to be different, in your world.
I think the first thing would be that we have really managed to do an incredibly good job of coping.
Yeah.
The switch to most people working from home, but the factories still continuing to run, has gone much smoother than I thought it would. And the moving from very few virtual meetings to having virtually everything on Teams has coped remarkably well. And I think given the nature of the lockdowns, the way that the organisation has also coped with, looking after either young children or homeschooling kids, has been quite remarkable. And we've seen people, be really flexible in the way that they've worked, shown a lot of resilience. I think that the challenge has been, as we've gone through, the series of lockdowns, is that resilience sort of almost ebbing away, and how to support people, and the importance of mental health has been a big thing. I've participated in a number of future of work forums, bringing together leaders from lots of different sectors. Actually,
okay,
it's amazing the way that everybody is looking at this as being a complete step change to the way we work for the long term.
Yeah.
In terms of a blend between home and office working, or much more remote working, but also really looking at, how do we build greater flexibility? Is the office that as we knew gone? And does it become almost just a collaboration and meeting point in the future? And that's something that we're quite interested to explore. But the other side of it is that, we run food factories, and we have 3 factories effectively in the UK, plus a yogurt plant that I'm partially responsible for in Wales. And obviously, because, we're feeding the nation, that well-used phrase, we've had to keep the factories running. And the amount of social distancing that we've had to put in, the PPE precautions, temperature checking, etc. And I'm really pleased that the factories have managed to keep going. And that's been, a real tribute to the guys running the sites, because when you've got 300-400 people on a site, for the ability for COVID to hit the site and then spread very rapidly is obviously there. And of course, as a business that imports a lot of products, we've had the challenge of Brexit to deal with as well, which has been fun.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I've come across from some of the other chats that I've been having is, to a certain extent, leaders have got to know each other a lot better, and probably a little bit more intimately than they would have done normally, because it's sort of, we've all been sort of coming into each other's homes.
I would agree with that, Mark. I mean, I think whether that's within our own organisation of, dogs, cats, etc., all appearing in things, children, food in the middle of the afternoon and stuff. And I think that's all been, very positive. But also, I'd say also with customers as well, on various things with pretty senior people at Tesco, and you end up, they've got a bike on a turbo trainer behind them in there, and you end up having a conversation about that. So I do think it's driven a level of yes, an informality, but also a level of personal connection that will last a lot longer. And it's interesting. I ran a meeting with all of our directors, including the site directors and their direct report team. So about 55 people. And we ran it all completely on Zoom with lots of different breakout rooms. But a lot of what we did in the first part of each, we did it for 2 half days. The first part of each session was just getting to know you. And we dropped people into random breakout rooms with a few questions to answer, just to start to try and break down some barriers. And it worked really well. And we also combined that with using a tool called Menti, an online tool.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Much more participation in all of the discussion sessions than we've ever had before. So normally, you get 5 or 6 people in a group of 50 who ask questions at the end. But when anybody can ask a question through Menti, it just immediately, you get a lot more interaction with people. You then can upvote the questions, and then, somebody like I will sit there and answer them.
Yeah.
You get a much more authentic conversation, I think, that way. And that's been a real massive eye-opener for me about how we can also use all of this online meeting technology for actually having better connectivity than sometimes we've had in the past. So
yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, really good. Yeah, you find a lot of people talking about the downsides, but actually, virtual working, and if it's handled properly in the right context, it is incredibly powerful. And I think we're going to see, probably, as you've indicated, more and more use. The second part of this, Mike, was really, to pick your brains and get your view on as we start to come out of the out of lockdown and business starts to re-emerge. What do you think you're going to see that's different as we go forward?
I think in terms of when I look at where people are using and consuming our products, clearly we've had a massive switch, because in our business we had about 25% of our business in what I would call food service.
Yeah.
Whether that's coffee shops to pubs to restaurants, whatever. But I think we'll start to see some real interesting impacts when that eventually reopens, because clearly a lot of either chains on the high street or pubs will not be reopening. So where that segment emerges to, I think, is going to be quite an interesting phenomenon. And also, how busy that sector will be. So one, how confident will people be to go out and eat and drink? And secondly, there'll be a lot of people who've been employed throughout the whole lockdown, who've got plenty of money to spend.
Yeah.
A load of people who haven't.
Yeah.
So you're going to see this real sort of shearing, I think, especially the casual dining chains. We've seen a big jump in scratch cooking, which has been great for a lot of our more ingredient-led cheeses like mozzarella. Will that stay? I think that's also linked to the question of, will people be working from home a lot more?
Yeah, it's true.
But also what you've seen is that categories like ready meals, where our products are sometimes used as an ingredient by people like Bakkavor or Greencore or someone like that, ready meals have really struggled. Really struggled. Ready meals and food to go, because people have been less, so sandwiches have been down, for example. But I think the future of the ready meal will be an interesting one as well. And obviously, the fact that the grocers have all put on massive amounts of online order capacity, will people continue to order mainly online from home? And then the real question becomes, I was chatting to our marketing director about this morning, about how do you really understand shopper behavior when they're only going into a store very occasionally and they're not really experiencing new products? How do you encourage innovation? How do you encourage people to try something new, especially in an area of chilled product where you can't just send a sample out? It's ambient relatively. So for us, there's a lot of different nuances to that. So, if the cooking from scratch stays on, it'll be a very interesting time for people like us. And then I think, when it comes to the work environment, I think increasingly we will see a blend of office versus home.
Yeah.
I think some teams will find it better to be in the office, and some teams will be quite happy to work from home. So I was talking to some of our planning team earlier on today, and they were saying between the demand and the supply planning teams, there needs to be greater interaction. And actually it's better for them being in the office, because there's always little conversations that then spill over into impacts for other people. But for, you know, a large number of people, you know, that they've actually really embraced working from home in a lot of ways. So I think there'll be, you know, a switch more blended. I think as companies' office leases come up, you know, it's going to be a very interesting time. I wouldn't want to be a fund at the moment. I think that would be quite hard. But the other thing I think is really important is, and this links back to the whole virtual conferencing and Menti and stuff like that, is how do you make sure you hear from all of the people in your organization, you know, to really understand what people are thinking and feeling. Because we've all had a different experience of the pandemic and lockdowns. You know, my experience, you know, living in a house with a nice garden is very different from the experience of somebody in a small flat in central London. There could be a really fundamental step change in this, because you know, we're a French business. You know, they always wanted to have meetings face to face, which involved a lot of traveling to France. Well, now we're looking at shorter meetings and doing it all online.
Do you see that? Do you see that sort of emerging, sort of almost like as a blend going forward, Mike, where there will be, you know, a lot of far more virtual meetings, but then coming together to talk about some of the, you know, a big sort of once a quarter or once every 6 months we get together, because it's a really big issue and we need to be face to face to have that discussion with all of the nuances that it involves.
I think it will also depend on the organization and the country culture as well. I mean, you know, working in a French business where they're much more hierarchical and formal than we are, and they very much have championed being in the office. Whereas I think culturally in the UK, we've got much more used to remote working.
Yeah.
And it's about managing, it's not about managing people for the number of hours they're there, it's about managing people for output. And I see that as being hopefully one of the real things that comes out from this pandemic, is that an awful lot of leaders and managers have learned to trust their people more.
Yeah.
And deal with the people who break the trust. To me, hopefully, it really does start to change the culture of how we lead and manage people in organizations. And I think the other thing to build on top of that in the retail environment, Mark, is that as we've gone through the pandemic, a lot of the grocery retailers have range rationalized again, and are also fearful of the unknown. So I think there's probably less innovation almost going into stores.
Yeah.
So therefore, it's not as exciting an environment as it was. So, you know, all these concepts about retailtainment and retail theatre and all that, you know, we've kind of binned all of that in favour of running, getting out as fast as we can, or just doing it all online.
Yeah.
So how do you make, to your point, shopping more enjoyable again?
Yeah.
How do you, you know, really expose new products to people, or new, you know, almost new concepts. And I think that's how retailers are going to really have to look in a different way to how do we make it an enjoyable thing to do again, because we've all got out of the habit.
Yeah.
Or not all of us, but a lot of us have got out of the habit of physically going to stores, or it's only one person in the family goes and everybody, you know, so if, you know, if my wife and I go to the supermarket, we'll disappear off down different aisles, but I'll always go and have a look at the things that interest me. So brands I used to work for, or, you know, or I just go and look at the booze.
Yeah. Well, that is who you used to work for.
True, but, you know, there's also interest there as well. And I am drinking tea, by the way. It's not anything else.
It's super. So, Mike, big thanks for coming along to one of Dr. Mark's virtual tea time, or early tea chats.
Yes.
And I look forward to maybe picking up again and seeing whether some of the things that we've touched on actually come into play. So
Yeah.
once again, thank you, and go well.
Yeah, thanks, Bart. Thank you.